Hi, this is Mr. West Russett's Moustache, and today I'm talking about the Year 8 History SPM 3 assessment. I'm looking specifically at question 3. That's worth 24 marks, I think, out of the total of 32. So this is the one that's really worth improving. So let's get our green pens out and do some dirt. Classic. Okay, so the first thing you could do would be to agree with interpretation 1. So this bit here, look. That's the first thing you could do, all right? Now have a look at your work and see if you've done something like this. If you haven't, then add it in. In interpretation 1, it says that at Dunkirk, a miracle was born. The interpretation says this because that's a nice sentence starter for you there. And then you can look down here, look at these two key bits of information. So you could say the interpretation said it was a miracle because 345,000 Allied troops were evacuated and could fight again later in the war. And it was also a miracle because the aim was only to actually get 50,000 people off the beaches and harbours, and actually they got 7 times that nearly. Okay, so the key bit, have a look at this bit that's here and see if you can include some specific evidence, okay, about why Dunkirk could even be seen as a miracle. Champion. Now then, have a look at this. The next thing to think about is to disagree with the interpretation. So have a look at your answer. Have you done that? This is a kind of sentence starter here that you could use. Despite the fact that interpretation 1 says that Dunkirk was a miracle, it can be seen as a disaster because, and then you could use this evidence here. Now, no one wants to see all those figures in, but I think it'd be nice if you could put 2 of them in. So you could say it can be seen as a disaster because the British Army left 2,500 guns behind, and the RAF lost over 200 fighters trying to defend them out on the beaches. Or you could talk about the number of vehicles or the tons of ammunition. But what I would do is I would say, I want to, and the key word here is I want to challenge, if I could type, challenge the interpretation. So it says it's a miracle, and I want you to challenge the interpretation, okay? So that's really, it's a bit small, but that's what I want you to do, challenge the interpretation using the evidence that's here. So have a look at that sentence starter, look at your answer, have you put some evidence to say why it wasn't a miracle, and then drop those bits in. Okay, now, so you might have already agreed and disagreed with the interpretation, but we're going to try and take that on a little bit further on this slide, okay? So the first thing to think about is that the interpretation says, where are we, down here, that talks about the little ships, the role of the little ships, okay? But you could disagree with that because it sort of gives the impression that all week, for almost a week, the epic went on with the little ships. So it gives the impression that the little ships were involved for a week. But actually, we know that small craft only became involved after the 31st of May. So they weren't involved for the full week. So you could disagree with the interpretation. Actually, it says it was an epic that went on for a week and the little ships dodged their way into the waters and hauled soldiers who waded waist deep to safety. Okay, but actually, only 25,000 men, a tiny proportion really out of 345,000 were actually saved. So you could put, despite the fact, this bit here, look, despite the fact that the interpretation says that little ships save the soldiers, you could disagree with this because, and you could put that point there. And then, to start getting into the real high-level stuff, you could look at the role of the little ships has been exaggerated by the interpretation because. You can think about who's written the interpretation. Well, it's a book published in England, and when was it written? July 1940, okay? Now, at the time, we were still, it had just happened, 2 months earlier, and we were still obviously at war with Germany, and we still needed to keep morale in Britain up. Remember, Britain was fighting alone against Germany, okay? So Britain was kind of isolated, and they needed to keep morale up in the face of this isolation, okay? And you might want to then bring in this bit of information here, that historians have called the Roar of the Little Ships, the whole Dunkirk as a triumph, a necessary myth. Look, the necessary myth, because it was necessary to boost morale, but it wasn't true. So think that back when you're looking at this bit here. The Roar of the Little Ships has been exaggerated by the interpretation because it was a book published in England 2 months after Dunkirk. In England, they really needed to keep the morale up of the English because they were on their own against the might of the German army. And historians have called what the exaggeration about the little ships and about Dunkirk the necessary myth. Necessary to maintain morale, but not really true. So therefore, even though the interpretation accurately reflects the view in Britain that was put about at the time, it is a bit of an exaggeration. So I've kind of talked through there what kind of an answer you could think of. You could either rewind it or you could just look at the bits of information that are here and try, if you can, include, where are we? Try and include 1, 2, the bit that's there, and then 3 here. Is that okay? Good. And finally, it's good to think about whether you mostly agree or disagree with the interpretation, because that's quite a nice thing to do at the end. So have a look at your answer. If you've done the other bits, particularly the last slide, which is quite complicated, maybe have a look at this in your green pens, okay? Do you agree or disagree with the interpretation, and why? And just try and sum it up here. Try and talk in general terms, okay? Mostly agree, mostly disagree, and say why. Okay, thank you.